One of the things that I've noticed being a survivor of this is that oftentimes it's very hard for people to sympathize with women who've been in this situation, because for them it's like, oh, well, she chose it. Oh, well, she stayed. So I can only share with you my experience, and hopefully just having this knowledge gives you the opportunity to be a little bit more understanding with the women around you that are dealing with it. Like we've shared already with the statistics, the number of women that are dealing with it, you know somebody who's dealing with it. You know a child that may be having to see this every day. And you just may not be aware of it, and because you may not have ever seen the signs or anything like that. And that's why we're starting this honest conversation and dialogue. So just kind of telling you guys a little bit about my story, right? So my dad and I, my biological father and I, haven't always had the relationship that we have now. And so as a child, I felt very rejected, and I felt very incapable of love and affection from someone from the opposite sex. I felt that they were not always reliable, because that was my experience with my father at that time. Thanks to counseling, I've been able to realize that I've had to let that pain and that hurt go, right? And accept that he was doing the best he could with the knowledge that he had at the time that he had it, and let it go. That's the me now. Me back then just walked around feeling rejected, like I didn't matter. And so that carried on from just early on in life. Fast forward to when I'm 5, the first time that I really feel like I'm sharing this relationship with someone from the opposite sex, you know, who my parents, which would be my mom and my stepdad, trusted to take care of me when they were at work, and was a family member to us, abused that power. And when I was little, it caused a lot of confusion, right? Because at first it didn't come off as immediate molestation, because my mama didn't play that. Mary Hines, she, for as long as I can remember, my mom told us what a good touch and a bad touch was. So I knew that off rip. But what happened was the molestation started with just him tongue kissing me. And so for a long time I was conflicted, because I didn't like it and it felt really weird. But I had asked my mom one day, I said, hey Ma, why don't you kiss us on the lips? Like, I had seen it on TV, so I knew people kissed on the lips. I just didn't know why my mom didn't do it. And, she just thinking it was an innocent question was like, parents and grandparents and family members kiss each other on the lips all the time. It's just not how we show affection in our home. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, this tongue kissing has to be pretty normal, even though I don't like it. So this went on for years. And then around the time I was 9, he actually did an inappropriate touch that I knew was an inappropriate touch. And so I went to, an immediate person that was in the home, and then I took it as well to my mother. And, didn't get the response that I was hoping to receive. A lot of it had to do with the fact of just how much knowledge this man had of the Word of God, and how wonderful he was with fabricating his excuses. And so from that moment, I didn't really feel comfortable to tell anybody when I was dealing with something, because it's like, y'all not gonna believe me anyway. So anyway, fast forward through life, I dealt with a lot of confusion. Being molested early on as a child changes your perception and how you look at things. Here I was, by the time I'm 9, and I'm looking at grown men, and I'm wondering, well, why don't they tell me that I'm sexy, or I'm beautiful, or that I'm attractive, or that they like my body, or anything like that. That was really confusing to me. So it kind of changed my the way I look at myself, the way I valued myself. Like, why is it that this person tells me that I'm the most beautiful woman in the world, and that I'm so sexy and I'm beautiful and I should be a model and I should be on covers and everything? And then, just being as transparent as possible. I'd get home and I would see, because the confusion came because it was a family member, right? And then I'm like, well, my stepdad doesn't say the same things or look at me in that way. And, other people around me don't look at me or feel that same way. So am I really not as beautiful as he says that I am? And so I kind of walked through that. Being molested at a young age as well, I felt like sex gave me power. That's where I felt the most power, being able to control when, where, how, and with who I wanted it to. Led to me being kind of promiscuous for a while. There it is. I said it. You know, everybody think it's cute to have a little hoe phase. It really ain't that cute sometimes, having that hoe phase. You hiding from something that you really don't want to admit, but that's going to be a whole nother lesson in itself. No judgment, right? Because it's a judgment-free zone. I'm only speaking for myself. But, you know, that was a time for me where I was feeling like I was empowered, because here I am being able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want. Ironically, it was always with older men. Anyway, fast forward to my very first overall really abusive situation. It didn't start off that way, obviously. And he started off, he was like my best friend in the entire world. Like, we related on so many levels. When I tell y'all that for the first time in my life, I truly felt understood. And if you've never walked through life being the black sheep of the family, just being weird and an oddball, and having a human being understand you to the very core of your being, you don't understand how much of a great feeling that can be. So, you know, like, one of the struggles for me, I'm first generation in the States. I'm 100% Honduran. So growing up here in the United States was different, because, you know, I'm being raised by parents that lived in a third world country. And so their way of doing things was not at all like how people around me did things, or showed love. And so, you know, we identified on that level, right? He was first generation in the States too. So he understood a lot of my struggles. He was the black sheep of his family. He as well was molested as a child. So there was all of these things that we just really instantly connected with, identified with. At the time, I had, you know, just gotten out of a really long relationship. So we just took our time. We were really good friends first. As a matter of fact, he was the one who pushed me to start blogging. And I started a blog. That blog went on to be a success before I stopped doing things with it. Like, this is before, you know, influencers and things of that nature. Before that was big, you know? And so it was cool that my platform gave me an avenue for money, to sell my, you know, to sell anything I wanted to sell at that time. Because I hadn't quite started selling books on there just yet, when it was already bringing in revenue for me. I had people sending me free stuff like, hey, just do a review. You don't even have to talk about it on your blog. Just do a review for us and it'll be all good. And so I started doing that, and that opened the gateway for me to start doing spoken word poetry. And then that started bringing in some really good revenue for me. And then, you know, because he was also a poet and a writer himself, he kind of pushed me and was like, well, what's going on with this book, you know? To show his support for me, he started buying me things. Like, he was the very first person who believed in me and bought me a laptop and was like, here, no more excuses. Let's get this done. Gave me all the information that I needed to just start my business. So at the time, I was feeling really empowered. I was feeling really loved. I was feeling really catered to. I was feeling an emotion that I had never really felt in a relationship before at all. And then the red flags didn't come through as red flags until much down the line. Like, the first thing that I kind of ignored that should have been a red flag of the level of control within him is, I remember, you know, this is when everything was going on, and, you know, me performing was being successful, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna write this book now. The first book I wrote was The Chronicles of a Love Addict. I had released it was just a collection of poems when I first released it, and I was starting to see revenue from that. And then he's like, okay, come on now, let's get these chapter books that you've been talking about out the way. And so I, you know, decide to do it. But one of the really bad qualities about myself is I am a perfectionist, to the point that I will allow it to cause me to either procrastinate or just not do it at all. Like, you know how most people will tell you, oh, just, you know, there's somebody out there doing more with less. Start now. I'm not that person. I'm learning to get away from that. But for most of my life, it's like, no, I need the perfect lighting. I need the perfect camera. I need the perfect equipment. I need the perfect sound equipment. If I don't have it and it's not going to look 100% authentic and real, I don't want a part of it. And that was a really bad quality about myself. And so when he started doing things that were controlling at the time, it was like, oh, he's just helping to push me through greatness. So I remember, he had his own car and everything, whatever. But I remember him coming into my home one day, and he took my car keys, he took my phone, and he was just like, okay, right. Now you have no distractions, nothing to bother you, just right. And, so for me at that time, I'm like, man, look at how much he cares for me. Just like literally putting me into a place where I have no distractions, because social media was a distraction for me. Running to go hang out with my friends was a distraction for me. And so I'm like, he must really care. He's trying to help me get this book finished. Oh my gosh. But really, that was the first sign that he was trying to show his dominance and the control that he thought he had over me. And the first time he took it, my car keys and my phone, it was only for a couple of hours. And so for me, I'm like, yes, I wrote a chapter. This is great. The second time that it happened, same thing, just for a few hours. And then as time went on, and I'm like, okay, I'm in the flow of writing. I don't need you to take my stuff for me to be committed to writing. He was still doing it anyway. And that was because at that point he felt like he had power and control over me. So if he wanted to take my stuff from me, he could.